Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. I just wanted to spend some time today and talk to you about my influences in my studio practice and who really just drives what I do. This is Grandma Ruby Lee Pitts. This is my great grandmother, and as you heard, my work is really influenced by the experience of matrilineal Blackness that I've really found home, refuge, imagination, and healing within. Through my work, I look at family photographs of Black women who've really influenced how I move through the world and the woman that I am today. And in these photographs, the Black interiors that surround them and surround me become influence for subject media. This is my grandma, Lily Ruth McKenzie, and you can see her in a Black interior space. But also in these photographs, these are moments where these women really display and take on a sense of strength, personality, and really presence within these Black interior spaces. The items that surround them are the items that make them, and the items that have made our family. Those items repeat themselves in my work and in my installations, in my collages and in my drawings. The objects that have been passed down to me from my mother, given to her from her grandmother, are the objects that I find significant. This is my mama, Daria McKenzie, in her Black interior space, in the space that I remember seeing growing up, a space that was really influenced by patterns, textures, tones of sepias, orange, purples, and greens. But really this sense of like building your identity through these spaces, but also having these intersections between other Black interior spaces that I would visit, my friends, my other family members, and thinking about those objects that are unique, but also display a sense of culture. And this is me. This is a photograph of me in my 2019 installation, Bosom, that was at Hall Contemporary. And this was the first time that I really got to a space of being forced to think about home through my work. The months building up to this exhibition, all of the work was influenced by these Black interiors that I had lived in and that had influenced myself since the age of 18. And I got to a point eventually where I felt like I just had to create this space in the physical using wallpaper, furniture, those matrilineal items that had been passed down to me, and collected and gifted items to really create this space that was experiential. The mask in this piece are masks that I grew up seeing every day. Within these Black interior settings, I'm thinking about how I define the language for myself within that healing and refuge and experience, but really also define a language for healing from intergenerational trauma. So for me, the Black interior is about really investigating those desolate truths and overt absences within my childhood experience, really reflecting and being truthful about the experiences that were not the best as a child, but recreating these spaces as an opportunity to heal from those experiences. So I don't have any artists in my family per se specifically, but all of my family has this sense of creativity, really driven around the Black interior. My grandma really took a lot of pride in the way that she presented our house. And so within these documented photos that I have from decades that she would just take of her living room space, her vanity area, the dining room, in a sense of like proudness that I hadn't found until being an adult. I'm also thinking about the public and private nature of the Black interior and how the spaces within our homes become reflections of that private and public in the way that we experience ourselves, but the way that we experience ourselves in relations to others. And so sometimes the spaces in our home can feel like it is the private, but it's also the public. And so thinking about the living room and the dining room as a different space in a different way that you think about your bedroom. This is documentation of my grandma's vanity area. And so within these Black interior settings, also thinking about the objects that really are specific to you. So within my work, I'm talking about Blackness and my specific experience of Blackness related to matrilineal objects. But I think it's important to also be very specific in how that sounds, smells, tastes. And so that's why I'm using these objects or a specific color palette or the objects that are significant to me to talk about that intersectional feeling of Blackness and it not being a monolith. This is my grandma's dining room that I grew up having Sunday meals at, holiday meals at with my cousins and family. And this is a view of my 2019 installation, Bosom, where you can see how these objects and materials come into play within the way that I think about installation within my studio practice. And so going back to that color and feelings of nostalgia, my experiences of Blackness is wrapped around these tones, wrapped around these textures and smells. In spaces where I'm allowed, you can smell incense in the tones and the smells and the scents that I really grew up and embraced and have that specific sense of healing too. So the other kind of aspect about my work that is important to recognize is the implementation of these spaces within the white wall gallery setting. And what does that mean for the viewer, the participants, or the people who regularly inhabit these spaces steeped in white supremacy? So for me, the work got to a point where thinking about my place as an artist, having a responsibility to make spaces that my people felt comfortable in. And so this shifts the dynamic of an opening when people of color can come into this space and we're not centering capitalism or buying work, but we're thinking about the experience of these healing spaces and thinking about how everyone can connect to that sense of home. Here's some parallels of the family photographs that I use for inspiration. In my 2019 exhibition, I used the Sunday table that I grew up having meals at. And so it's important to talk about that specificity within the objects themselves. My grandma selflessly let me borrow her table for, for 4 months. And she told me I should buy her a new one too, which I am when I get there. But she got an opportunity to see this show. And within that and looking at these photographs, I really think about how within the experience for people of color, how we use the objects that surround us to think about beauty, to think about aesthetics, and to make art, and to think about and read through our creativity, because we often don't have access to objects that we can choose ourselves. And so then we have to use what's around us, and it forces us to see the beauty in the trauma and in the healing as well. This is after Central Street, a collage of my apartment from 2018 here in Kansas City. This was my apartment that I had my first heartbreak in, grew as a woman in, my first space that was mine. And you can see those colors that really are my reflections of home. Through the materials I use, I really think about materiality as a metaphor to describe Black culture. I'm using these papers that I've prepared, been gifted, found, collected, picked up on the street, and really pasting, cutting, putting those together in new assemblages in the same way that we think about how Black culture is influenced by multi-generationals, torn apart and pieced back together because of colonialism, and refigured into something better and something new every time. So you can see my collages are crusty, textural, and really ask the viewer to get up close to that materiality in the metaphor. So in reflecting on the objectness of the Black interior, also think about how those objects can personify these spaces. And so in the same way that you think about a figure interacting with these Black interiors, I think about those objects my mom have given me. Because they really become representations for the people in my life within the spaces that I live in away from them. So I do snapshots and self-portraits of these objects that have been passed down to me, but also thinking about within Black culture how it's important to acknowledge the symbols that have become synonymous with Black culture that we've not chosen ourselves, and how we have the power to disassemble those and play with those and really make them into the narrative that we want. You can see the mark making within my graphite work really translating to the materiality of my collages. In the same way I'm thinking about material and collage in paper and cut materials, I'm also thinking about breaking up space in that same language, using light, air, and atmosphere and shadow to make collage within drawing. So within the collage work, it's also, opportunities to get physical with those materials. In the collage on the left, Cruising Together, you can see purple Crown Royal bags, which are a symbol of Black culture, regardless if we chose that or not. So I think about the colors as well that are synonymous with Blackness, and think about those as an opportunity for reflection and conversation within the Black interior. Currently, I'm going through family photographs of Black women, Black femmes in my family within Black interior settings and redoing those within specific color tones. This is a photo of my Aunt Donna, probably from the 70s. And you can see how I've begun to think about how I can recreate these images through the collage and through the material with representing the language that it came from, but also talking about a new language through the mark making and the materiality. Within the Black interiors, from the previous example in this one, I also am implementing figures in those interiors that most of the time are stand-in for people in my life, people that I wish I would have had relationships with, my dad, my brother, and folks that I've, as an adult, had to come to terms with through my work about my relationship with their absence. And so this is a series that I started in 2018 that follows the chronology of a couple through my apartment. And so some of the works have both figures in them, some of them have one and some of them have none. And it's to talk about the mark making in relationship to the emotion and the feelings displayed in the figures. This is another work from that series, Ain't No Way, in 2019. And so you can see really how I'm thinking about light, tone, and shadow in a sense of making tone and texture through the graphite. And here in these works are also opportunities to kind of retell narratives from the past. So some of those narratives are also contemporary, like the last work we've seen, but some of these narratives are also just based on experiences that I remember as a little girl. The experience of sitting in my mama's lap and getting my hair done, and thinking about how experience within itself can also be synonymous with Blackness. How this experience of sitting in your mom's lap, sitting on a pillow, and being in connection and influence with Black feminism, with Black hair, is something that's specific to Black femdom. This is an investigation photo series that I did with my friend Sylvia Beatrice Ibaside and my 2019 installation, Bosom. Within my installations, I have a lot of spaces for reflection through materials, and most of the time those materials are mirrors and windows. And so within those, I see those as opportunities for self-reflection, really thinking about the past narratives that these spaces have been influenced from, but how my experience, my contemporary experience as a Black queer femme is different from my mom's and my grandma's experience in these Black interiors. And what is the specificity within my experience, and what do those actions look like specifically? And so this is me in a photo narrative series, putting on a do-rag. This is another photo from that series of thinking about self-investigation through these spaces, but also thinking about these spaces as opportunity to reflect really kind of a sense of imagination and royalty within these spaces. So poet and scholar Elizabeth Alexander, a book that I go to back often is The Black Interior by Elizabeth Alexander. And she describes the Black interior as a space for Black people to be able to envision themselves outside the public face of stereotype, a space that allows us to see everything that we are meant to be, rampant and unfetishized Black beauty. So within these spaces, we are allowed to figure out ourselves and figure out our histories, and through the objects, really reflect and investigate the histories that surround us. This is a photo of me and my two grandmas within that installation space at my grandma's Sunday table that I grew up having Sunday meals at. The one who's smiling the hardest, that's her table. And the grandma that I'm most connected with as well. In the installation, I'm also thinking about how I can translate that language of collage to material. So I'm often cutting and pasting those wallpapers in the same way in the installation here you see that I've done with graphite. This is a photo of me and my family in these installation spaces. And so again, thinking about how the White Wall Gallery through my work has completely been transformed to a space for healing. This space that has historically not represented or reflected my people from a sense of a self-biographical stance, us being able to tell our own stories outside of the white gaze. My installations are all about that juxtaposition, completely disengaging and depowering the history of the institution, and taking it outside of the academy, outside of the institution, into an experience about healing and refuge and intergenerational connections. This is my grandmother's, my mom, and my dad with me. The installation here is all about those same languages, really thinking about the matrilineal languages that I've made for myself as an adult within the Black interior setting. And those experiences are specifically attached to spiritualism and herbalism and making my own inks and making my own oils and really finding a place for myself within those spiritual processes. Something that I've embraced in the last few years and within the pandemic is really giving myself the permission for my light to show up as whatever it is and whatever it needs to be that day. And so right now my practice is really based around these communal care practices and thinking about these installations as opportunities and spaces for communal reflection, spaces for healing. Thank you.